Hey, Talkhouse listeners, it's Josh Modell, and I've got a couple of very special guests here to talk about a new podcast that they're working on for the Talkhouse Podcast Network. It's maybe sort of self-explanatory, but Craig Finn and Jody Avirgan, I would love for you to talk a little bit about summer album, winter album. First of all, hi.
Hello.
Hey,
Thank you for joining me.
thanks for having us.
Craig, as listeners know, both from the Hold Steady and from his fabulous podcast, That's How I Remember It. Jody, I think I would run out of our 5 to 7 minutes if I talked about all the podcasts you've been involved with. Is there one in particular that people stop you on the street and say, Jody, let me tell you about this how much I love your podcast?
Well, if people want to be taken back to the election of 2016, I got stopped and asked about the 538 podcast, but mostly, 30 for 30, is the thing which are these sports documentaries. I'm, very proud of those, but yeah,
Awesome.
I just go from project to project, and, I'm very excited that this is my first real music project. Music has been the thing that has organized my life mostly. And so it's just taken me a while to really kind of come around and do a proper music podcast. And then to have the chance to do it with Craig is pretty great. And Talkhouse.
Yeah. So, Craig, do you want to talk about what summer album, winter album is?
Yeah, well, I think this podcast in some way is an extension of a question I was asking on my own podcast quite often, which is music seasonal to you? And I'd say, like, what is spring music to you? What's fall music? And I found that most people did connect music with seasons, but also sometimes people had differing views of what a winter record, what a summer record, so Jody came and pitched it to me, kind of thinking that it could kind of become its own thing. And I think the part that I've really loved is that we don't allow fall or spring in the answer.
There's no such thing. Forbidden words.
It's a binary question, which makes it harder and more interesting to think about. And so we've assigned ourselves a season in each of these records, brought on a guest, and debated classic records on, the merits of whether they're a summer record or whether there's a winter record.
What was the first record that inspired you to sort of ask that question? Or, I suppose there's records that are very obvious to you, but like, what's the first one where you're like, I'm actually not sure.
Well, I have an origin story for how I kind of came to this idea
Oh, good.
of seasonality and then this idea of the show. And then it's evolved as I've, worked with Ian and Talkhouse and Craig. But I am somewhat friends with John Natchez, who plays in, among other things, The War on Drugs. And I was once telling him about their album Lost in the Dream and how, to me, that is the quintessential frigid weather record because it came out when I think it was called the bomb cyclone or some sort of cold air front from Canada descended upon New York. And that album happened to come out, or at least, I was really listening to it heavily during that. And so it's just been so tied to me with just freezing my butt off walking around New York City. I told him that, and he was like, what are you talking about? As we were making that album, all we could talk about was this is the driving up the PCH with the top down and a convertible warm summer breezes album. And I just it broke my brain to especially coming from someone who actually worked on the album. But I was like, no, you're wrong. Sorry. I know you made that album, but no. And so it just got me really thinking about that tension. And then a lot of the stuff that Craig and I have explored and it's fun to think about, which is, how much of this is something inherent in the album? How much is it something that you bring to the experience? How much is it about instrumentation or the release or the touring? All these things kind of do play in. And that's stuff that Craig was already exploring with that question that he asks on his other show.
Yeah, and overall, I think that my it deals a lot with memory. So it's kind of how we can attach memories to works of art, music, books, film, whatever, and sort of attach our own experience to it in a way that becomes a part of it. And, as someone who also makes music, that's really interesting to me because, I think certain Hold Steady records are definitely summer records, but that's not everyone's experience. And, I think about, well, for instance, Stay Positive, we started recording, I think, on January 2nd, but it came out on July 15th. So, what is it?
Right.
And in my experience, I remember trudging through the snow in Hoboken to go make that. But the first song is called Constructive Summer.
And you're touring it in the dead of summer, right?
Yeah, and it comes out, and we were in London, and I remember it being very hot even for London. So you have all these disparate memories.
So walk me through what an episode is going to look like. You guys each, I assume, will take a position that you feel somewhat or very strongly about.
Ian, the proprietor of Talkhouse, has been very encouraging of us embracing the sort of crossfire mentality. I would say it's probably a little closer to maybe like high school debate club, right? I mean, I have
Yeah.
found it really fun and sort of satisfying to write these little essays at the top where I have to argue my case. So I don't think we're arguing necessarily with each other, but we are arguing different positions. So each of us gives a little essay, an argument at the top. We mix up who goes first and who's arguing which. I will say, like, when we first started thinking about this, I made a huge spreadsheet of 50 albums that I thought were worth discussing. And I sent it to Craig and made a column. It said, one said Jody, one said Craig, and had a little drop down menu, summer or winter. And I was actually really shocked how many we just naturally disagreed on.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Every once in a while, like high school debate club, you kind of have to argue a position that maybe you don't fully agree with, but just for the sake of this. But mostly we've just been able to kind of find ones that we naturally lean in different directions on. So we do that. We do the little opening statements. Sometimes we can react to each other as we're doing those. And then we bring in a guest who reacts a little bit to what they heard, but doesn't offer their verdict at that point. And then we just kind of back into a conversation about albums we love, and we just talk about the record and our relationship with it and some of the making of it. And then we circle back around and the guest weighs in and says what they think, and maybe their thinking has sort of changed. And I guess that's technically declaring a winner of the debate. And then the other thing we're trying to do is at the end of each episode, we are trying to get a verdict from the artist themselves, or as close to the artist as we can get. So we're like hunting down all these artists to try and get voice memos from them saying, actually, this is where I land. And we've had, I'd say, surprising success at that, but we'll save that for when people actually listen.
Do you guys want to tease any of the albums that you'll be covering in the first few episodes?
Yeah. Let me try to think of them in order. We did Lonesome Crowded West, Modest Mouse. We did Joni Mitchell, Court and Spark, Graceland, Paul Simon, Slanted and Enchanted. Recently we did
Is This It? The Strokes.
Is This It by the Strokes, Norman fucking Rockwell, Lana Del Rey. And am I missing one? Oh, we did the first Belle and Sebastian. What's it called?
If You're Feeling Sinister.
If You're Feeling Sinister. Yeah.
And we're going to do a Modern Vampires of the Weekend, Vampire Weekend album. So we're kind of trying to jump around a little bit, and some of these are albums that were on that original list, but then sometimes when we reach out to guests, they'll come back and say, oh, here's an album that I really love and want to talk about and think has some interesting fodder for you.
Which one so far has you guys most strongly at odds, thinking the other one is insane?
I kind of feel like Lonesome Crowded West. I mean, I felt very strongly that was a winter record, and Craig, I think, felt pretty strongly that was a summer record. And it also, I guess we can give this away. Kevin Morby was our guest for that. Kevin eventually revealed that he landed with Craig on that as a summer record.
Interesting.
It also started a pattern that is emerging of Craig's basically, quote unquote, winning all of these. I mean, all the guests tend to agree with Craig.
Almost undefeated. Almost undefeated.
Undefeated.
But, I dropped the last one.
Whether it's summer or winter, it is kind of remarkable. Yeah.
Any other guests you'd like to tease, or should we leave that as a mystery?
No, I mean, we're going to announce, our lineup of guests and our lineup of albums, though we won't say who's on for who, though we can do that here. But Malcolm Gladwell was on to talk about Graceland because he did this really remarkable audiobook podcast series with Paul Simon. And so I think he had some real good insight. And he totally went full Gladwell on me, just tying me into logic knots. And I was like, damn it, I see where this is going. And I can't. He got me. So that was good. Who else? Amanda Petrusich at The New Yorker is going to do a Vampire Weekend album with us.
Nice.
Kevin Morby, as we said. Tim Heidecker.
Oh, fun.
So, bunch of fun. Yassi Salek from Vansplain did a Pavement album with us. So, yeah.
Amazing. Are people who live in Los Angeles allowed to vote because they don't get winter?
It's a very good question. Yeah.
This is an interesting thing because I feel growing up in Minneapolis, I have more winter records than your average person.
Yeah.
And that's part of my thesis, that it does affect. But, Los Angeles does have winter. It's a different winter. There are the months of December.
That doesn't count. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's my judgment on that. I know
true.
I'm not part of the podcast, but no.
Look, I'll say one of my concerns or going into this was, oh gosh, basically if, you find all the music you love between the ages of 18 and 24, and will a pattern emerge where it's just where did you happen to be living when you were a teenager or in your early 20s? And that's going to be your memories associated with this record. And then that's just going to be the answer. And, I think occasionally that's been Craig's yeah, my memory of listening to this record is freezing my ass off in Minneapolis and driving around. And it's okay. But I've been surprised and sort of pleasantly surprised that I think people are finding different ways to get in and attack this question. It's not just purely about when did you first experience it. And there are things within the records themselves that I think tilt it one way or the other. I mean, I'm personally really interested, especially as a non-musician, into kind of talking about the instrumentation and the production value and how that tilts it in one way or another. I think I said it on one of our albums, but it's like, can you have a harpsichord on your record and not have it be a winter record? There's like interesting questions like that I think are worth exploring.
I was going to say sleigh bells. I mean, sleigh bells is automatically, right?
Right. Well, sure. Yeah.
Great. Anything else that we should cover?
It's every other week. So starting Friday, February 21st. In between weeks, we're trying to do a lot of stuff on social media. Especially, we're trying to just get people we like who we think have interesting taste in music. And we're doing quick videos with them where we just throw like 10 albums at them rapid fire. And they have to, no thinking, gut check, whether they know the album or not, just say summer or winter. And that's been fun too. We'll get you in on one of those at some point.
I would love to do it. I hope I wouldn't get them all wrong. But like Craig, I grew up in the Midwest, so
there's no wrong.
Yeah.
They're all, every album feels cold.
Who do we think is I was trying to think, who's the most winter band?
The most winter band?
That's a very good question.
I mean, my mind immediately went to the Replacements, but it's just because it's you guys are sharing that geography.
Mine was similar. It's Husker Du, which I think has a very icy sound.
You can hear it.
I mean, in my head, I've always said the kind of like the sort of logical twisted extension of this podcast is if I were to find myself sitting here arguing that Nick Drake's 5 Leaves Left is a summer record or something, But actually, I think in our spreadsheet, I put Pink Moon and we may have disagreed on it. And so I do want to do Pink Moon at some point, and I want to hear what the summer argument for Pink Moon is. But, sort of really austere folk feels
I think you could make the summer argument for that record.
I know how I'd make the summer argument.
That Volkswagen ad, Craig?
No, but it is, I got into that record through a cover of Pink Moon, the song, and it was by Walt Mink, a band from the early 90s, and it was sunnier.
Yeah.
It was more fun. It was more like college rock. So I'm always attached to that. That's where I'd start.
Right. Yeah.
If I had to start sitting and write my essay today.
But like Tim Heidecker suggested Court and Spark, the Joni Mitchell album, which is an incredible album. And really, I thought we had a really rich conversation kind of using this lens. I mean, if he'd suggested Blue, a little tougher maybe, or just maybe less interesting or whatever. I don't know. And so even within discography, I mean, Vampire Weekend, I think Modern Vampires of the City is the album that most kind of fits this kind of exploration.
Yeah.
So I think even within bands, you kind of can tell that different albums tilt different ways.
Making the opposite argument, my mind immediately went to what album could only be a summer album.
Yeah.
And my brain went to ZZ Top Tres Hombres. There's no argument that that's a winter record in any scenario, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of hip hop albums, like it's tough, like especially West Coast hip hop or like Outkast albums. Like I would love to, some of my favorite records, but like I think some albums, it's a little hard to find this entry point. Craig, I feel like there's some album that we've brought up a few times as kind of too sprawling to really do it. It's like depends on which 4-song run you want to find. I mean,
I mean, I'm trying to think if we've gotten that.
I mean, is Tusk that way or
maybe Tusk seems summery to me.
Yeah,
rumors. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about Prince. I mean, again, there's the geography thing, but like a lot of those have a good summer argument.
I think London Calling is kind of a bit of a white whale for us. I mean, obviously I know, Craig, that's one of your favorite albums, but that's the one. Yeah, that's an album where it's so sprawling and has so much in it. I think you could go like 3-song by 3-song chunk and kind of have this conversation with that. So,
well, I think just this conversation sort of proves that you guys have hit on a good idea here because it's just music nerds eating it up.
Yeah, ultimately that's what it is. And it's been really fun to just talk about these records for sure.
Awesome. Thanks so much for chatting it up. I'm excited to hear every damn one.
Well, I'm excited to be part of the Talkhouse family, so thank you.
Woo, welcome.